Before you call me cruel, answer one question. If the man you loved had stopped caring for his own body, would you stand by and watch him disappear inside it? I did not leave my husband in the desert. I gave him a 12-mile accountability run, with water in the car and thousands of people encouraging him. He kept touching that old black watch as if numbers could make everyone feel sorry for him. By the time the police lights appeared, more than 18,000 viewers were watching me prove that I was the only one still fighting for our marriage. I was certain the officers would understand. My name is Simone Keller. I was 40, and I managed social content for a regional grocery company in Phoenix. My job was to turn ordinary food into a story people wanted to join. A bowl of soup was never just soup. It was comfort after a hard day. A family dinner was not 4 plates on a table. It was proof that someone had chosen to come home. That belief did not begin at work. My father left when I was 14. He packed one grey suitcase and moved in with a woman who taught dance classes. My mother had gained weight after years of cooking for him, and I heard him tell an uncle that he wanted to feel young again. Of course, nobody said he left because another woman was thinner. Adults prefer soft words when the hard ones are obvious. So when I met Ethan in college, I paid attention to who watched him. He ran distance for the university. He was lean, quiet, and so disciplined that he could pass a vending machine without looking at it. Women noticed him after races. They touched his shoulder when they congratulated him. I pretended not to count. 2 after his first meet that fall. 4 at the spring relay. Why would that matter to a secure woman? Ethan never flirted back. His problem was almost the opposite. When I admitted that the attention made me nervous, he told me I had nothing to worry about, kissed my forehead, and went to stretch. He believed a fact should end a feeling. It rarely did. I began bringing food to his evening practices. First, it was soup in a steel container. Then pasta, bread, and the chocolate cake he liked. He would sit beside me on the lowest bleacher with his black running watch still ticking on his wrist. He said nobody had ever waited for him with a hot meal. That was real. I will not let anyone erase it. The first time he skipped a team dinner to eat with me, I slept better than I had in months. Soon I cooked on every practice night. If he wanted to run after dinner, I asked why being with me was never enough. I never ordered him to stop. I only made him choose between another hour on the road and the woman who had spent all afternoon feeding him. He chose me. After we moved into our first apartment, I filled the freezer every Sunday. Ethan sometimes said the portions were too large. I answered that my mother had measured love by empty plates and that refusing food made me feel rejected. He would sigh, finish what I gave him, and rub my shoulder while I washed the dishes. I saw comfort. He saw peace at the lowest price. After graduation, the miles became shorter. Then they stopped. Ethan took a job maintaining city vehicles, where long shifts began before sunrise. I packed heavy lunches because the work was physical. When he gained 20 pounds, I called it married weight, even though we were still engaged. When he gained 40, I bought him larger shirts before he could complain that the old ones pinched. He kept the watch in a drawer. 16 years of marriage changed both of us. My work moved from store flyers to videos. His work moved from repair bays to a supervisor's office. He became careful with budgets and silent with feelings. If I asked whether he still wanted me, he checked the thermostat, filled my car with gas, or repaired something I had not asked him to touch. Those were answers in his language. I needed one in mine. 3 months before the road trip, I found the old watch on his wrist again. We were standing in our bedroom while I deleted a college photo from my page because several women had commented on how handsome he had been. Ethan asked why I had posted it beside a recent picture of him asleep on the couch. I told him the contrast was funny. He asked whether funny had to mean that he was the joke. Then his thumb pressed the watch face, and he went quiet. I read that quiet correctly, or so I thought. Ethan hid inside numbers whenever a conversation became uncomfortable. 1 button. 2 breaths. No answer. Of course, I was the one left carrying the emotion again. By then, he weighed 286 pounds. At first, I had loved every sign that other women might overlook him. Then I began seeing those signs everywhere. He breathed hard on stairs. He avoided photographs unless I pushed him into them. At restaurants, he asked for booths because some chairs pressed against his sides. The body that once made me feel unsafe now embarrassed me. I told myself embarrassment was concern. At home, concern had a camera angle. I filmed him carrying groceries and added music that made each heavy step sound comic. I photographed the button pulling across his shirt at my sister's dinner. When he asked me to delete one picture, I cropped it tighter and posted it to a smaller group instead. That way, I could claim I had respected the request without losing the joke. In private, I was harsher. I asked why he no longer wanted to look good for me. He reminded me that I had complained whenever he went to the gym after work. I said that had been years ago, and that an adult should not need permission to care for himself. He stared at me as if both statements could not live in the same marriage. Of course they could. People change their standards when life changes. He also snored, avoided crowded events, and left me attending work dinners alone because the seats made him uncomfortable. Those things mattered. I missed the man who had energy for anything. Ethan would say he missed him too, then return to the garage where machines gave him problems he could solve. His silence left space, and I filled it with an audience. Our friends helped me believe it. At a cookout in April, Ethan bent to lift a cooler and split a seam near the pocket of his shorts. The sound was small. Bryn heard it anyway. She had been my closest friend since my first grocery campaign, and she laughed before covering her mouth. I told the group that this was what happened when a woman adopted a college runner and turned him into a house pet. People laughed because I smiled first. That is how groups work. They take the tone from the person who seems least ashamed. Ethan set the cooler down. His hand went to the black watch. Later, in the car, he named the exact moment. He said the torn seam had been an accident, but showing everyone the old race photo from my phone had been a choice. He asked me not to use his body for entertainment again. I told him he was focusing on my delivery because he did not want to face the message. His doctor had already warned him about his blood pressure. A loving wife was allowed to make a point. What he meant was that I had hurt him. What I heard was that he wanted me to stay quiet. The clip from the cookout reached 40,000 views after Nate cut it down to 20 seconds. Nate was 31 and treated every emotion as a number with an arrow beside it. He worked freelance on our seasonal campaigns and kept telling me that my personal page could become a real source of income. According to him, couples who showed conflict held attention longer than couples who showed recipes. He said the house pet line was sharp. He suggested a husband boot camp series. Bryn loved the idea. She sent me a list of names, most of them silly. Couch to spouse. Save my man. Run. Hubby, run. She said Ethan would thank me after he lost weight. I chose not to tell them that he had asked me to remove the video. When Ethan found it still online, he did not shout. He saved the link to a folder on his phone. He had started doing that with my posts, including a reel where I compared his stomach to a grocery display. I called it scorekeeping. He said it was easier than arguing about words I later claimed I had never used. That was his cold side. He could turn a marriage into dates and files, then act surprised that I wanted warmth. He was not refusing to change. This is the part people ignore. Ethan made an appointment with a doctor. He stopped buying soda at work. He asked if I would walk with him for 30 minutes after dinner. I went twice. He spent both walks checking his pace and saying little. On the third evening, I had a live cooking session. On the fourth, Nate wanted to discuss sponsorships. By the fifth, Ethan went alone. He lost 6 pounds in a month. Nobody online could see 6 pounds. They could see a challenge. I never published that graphic. Even I knew Ethan would object. Instead, I mentioned the idea during a casual live session and watched the comments choose for me. Hundreds of strangers wanted a public weigh-in. Others wanted me to lock the pantry. The most popular suggestion was to make him run behind the car like a coach training an athlete. I laughed and said people were terrible. Then I saved the comment. In May, I visited Ethan's fleet yard because my car needed a new battery. A state police cruiser sat near one of the service bays. A tall sergeant named Elena Ruiz greeted Ethan by name and asked about a braking problem his team had found during an inspection. He explained the fault in calm, exact language. She listened closely. I joked that he saved his best conversations for engines. Sergeant Ruiz looked at me for half a second too long. Ethan touched his watch. I dismissed the whole exchange as mechanic talk. Knowing how brakes worked did not mean he understood what was failing at home. That night, he asked me to choose between content and our marriage. Not forever. Just when the content was about him. I told him that was unfair. My followers liked honesty, and he benefited from the groceries, invitations, and extra money the page brought us. He asked whether he had agreed to pay for those things with his dignity. Bryn said he was being dramatic. Nate said resistance often made a transformation series more believable. Of course, the two people who understood modern audiences sounded more reasonable than the man who still wore a watch from college. The road trip began 2 weeks later. My younger sister was turning 35 in Santa Fe. We planned to drive from Phoenix and stay overnight near Gallup. Ethan's blue crossover was better for the long route. He had bought it before our marriage with money from summer road work, and he maintained it as carefully as one of his city vehicles. I drove first because he had worked late. The dashboard mount held my phone at eye level. Nate had sent me a small wireless microphone and asked me to test it during the trip. I told followers there might be a surprise if Ethan gave me a reason. He heard that and asked what kind of surprise. I said he would ruin it if I explained. He checked the black watch, then looked out at the red hills. He had packed water, blood pressure tablets, fruit, and a small towel. I teased him for preparing like an athlete when he could barely jog to the mailbox. He said preparation was not a performance. That sentence stayed in the car for several miles. Near the New Mexico line, we stopped at an isolated travel center beside Interstate 40. Heat shimmered above the gas pumps. The air smelled of diesel and hot rubber. Ethan went inside while I answered Nate's messages. Nate wanted something bigger than another meal joke. He said the page had stalled and that live consequences would pull people in. He did not tell me to harm anyone. He never used those words. He only reminded me that viewers left when nothing happened. Ethan returned with 2 bottles of water, a cup of fruit, and 1 cinnamon roll sealed in plastic. He placed the fruit in my lap and kept the roll in the bag. I asked whether the doctor had prescribed frosting. He said the roll was for my sister because she always bought that brand on family trips. Then he asked why every piece of food had become a test he could fail. I saw the phone mount. I saw the open road. I saw a plan simple enough that even Ethan would understand it. When he stepped around the car to check the rear tire, I moved into the driver's seat. The keys were already in the console. He tapped the window when I locked the doors. I lowered it 1 inch and told him it was time for the first real husband boot camp. He asked me to unlock the door. I said I would, after he earned his seat. Then I rolled forward. At first, he walked beside the window. He asked what I was doing and told me the frontage lane was not safe for a game. I reminded him that he had once run 10 miles before breakfast. He said that had been 20 years and 100 pounds ago. I pressed the live button. The red badge appeared. 40 viewers became 300 before I reached the edge of the travel center. I angled the phone so the frame held my face, the side mirror, and Ethan behind me. The first minute looked almost harmless. Ethan still moved quickly. The travel center canopy stood behind him, and a few drivers turned their heads as they passed. I told the audience this was spontaneous discipline, the kind experts avoided because experts sold slow plans. My plan cost nothing. It needed 1 road and a wife willing to ignore excuses. Several viewers remembered the poll. They asked if this was the car challenge and posted the old race photo from Nate's graphic. I had never shared the final graphic, but screenshots had traveled from the casual live session. Ethan's college body appeared in the comments beside his current one. The comparison did more work than any insult I could have written. I introduced him as my little hog and told everyone I had finally taken him out for a run. The comments moved so quickly that I could not read every name. People posted laughing faces. Someone asked how far I planned to make him go. Nate joined and sent a row of fire symbols. Bryn wrote that she hoped I had water. I held up one of the bottles. Proof of care. Ethan reached the passenger door and pulled the handle. I moved just fast enough to take it away from him. His palm struck the glass, not hard, but the sound reached the microphone. He asked me to stop the car and end the stream. I told the audience that resistance was normal on day one of a fitness program. Then I slapped the outside of my door with my free hand and encouraged him to keep moving. The frontage road ran parallel to the interstate for several miles. It was mostly empty. I kept the crossover between 5 and 8 miles per hour. When another vehicle approached, I moved onto the wide shoulder. When Ethan slowed, I slowed. When he came close enough to touch the rear panel, I moved ahead. That balance made the stream exciting. He was never gone from the frame, but he was never close enough to get in. At mile 3, his shirt had darkened down the chest. He stopped jogging and walked with both hands on his hips. The black watch flashed when he raised his wrist. He told the camera that he had not agreed to the run. He gave the time and said I was refusing to let him into his own vehicle. I laughed because it sounded rehearsed. I told the viewers Ethan became a lawyer whenever exercise was involved. More laughing faces rose across the screen. At mile 4, the first comment called me abusive. I blocked the account. At mile 5, someone asked why he was breathing through his mouth. Another person wrote that his face looked grey rather than red. I said filters and desert light made everyone look dramatic. A woman with a profile picture of 2 children asked me to place one unopened water bottle on the road and drive away. I refused because Ethan would use that as an excuse to stop. A truck driver warned that the frontage road merged near an entrance ramp. I told him I could see the road better than someone watching through a phone. Then a viewer began posting a simple record of the stream. Start time. Estimated speed. Each time Ethan asked me to stop. I blocked that account too, but copies of the list appeared under new names. The audience was no longer watching one joke. They were building a timeline. Bryn sent a private message asking if Ethan had agreed before I started. I replied that spouses did not need written contracts for jokes. She did not send another laughing face. The road curved near a line of low mesas. Sunlight filled the windshield. My arm began to ache from reaching out to pat the door, but stopping would have made the whole idea look wrong. So I kept smiling. Ethan stumbled near a strip of loose gravel. One knee touched the ground. The phone caught it clearly. Comments flooded the screen. Stop now. Unlock the door. Give him water. A retired nurse wrote that he needed shade and a pulse check. I told her he wore a watch for that. He stood again. That proved my point. At mile 7, the viewer count crossed 6,000. Nate left the live session without saying goodbye. A private message followed. He told me not to mention his name or our company work. I thought he was protecting the surprise from corporate rules. Nate always became careful when an idea succeeded faster than he expected. Then viewers began posting the same numbers. I saw route 118, mile marker 42, west of Gallup. One person had read the green sign behind me when I turned the camera toward Ethan. Another had caught part of the plate in the mirror. 3 comments said they had called 911, then 5, then more. One caller wrote that dispatch had asked for the car color and direction of travel. Another said the operator wanted a screenshot of the last marker. A third viewer recognized the travel center canopy and estimated our starting point. They compared the curve of the frontage road with a map while I drove through it. The details arrived faster than I could block them. Blue crossover. Arizona plate. Woman in a cream blouse. Heavy man in a dark green shirt. Hazard lights near the westbound ramp. Someone posted the county. Someone else corrected it. The retired nurse told them not to guess and said she had remained on the line with dispatch. I angled the phone away from the windshield, but that made Ethan disappear from the shot. When I turned it back, the next mile marker passed behind my shoulder. The viewers captured that one too. I called them attention seekers. Anyone could type those numbers. The stream rewarded panic, and panic was still engagement. Ethan reached a guardrail and stopped. He bent forward, one hand on the metal. The other held up the black watch. His face had the empty focus I remembered from finish lines in college, when he had used every part of himself and was waiting for the world to become steady. For a few seconds, the heavier man disappeared. I saw the boy on the bleachers eating soup from my container. I saw how pleased I had been when he skipped the team dinner. I saw the full plates that came after, each one offered like love and accepted like peace. The phone chimed with another 1,000 viewers. I increased the microphone level and told everyone Ethan had always known how to perform exhaustion. The door closed again inside my head. He pushed away from the rail and kept walking. At mile 9, traffic thickened near an entrance ramp. Horns sounded behind me. I drove on the shoulder with my hazard lights flashing, still slow enough for Ethan to follow. A delivery truck passed close and shook the crossover. The retired nurse returned under a second account. She said dispatch had the route and officers were coming from both directions. Someone else wrote that the live stream was being recorded even if I deleted it. I thanked them for increasing my reach. That was when Bryn called. I sent it to voicemail. She texted one word asking me to stop. No joke. No heart. Just stop. I wrote back that she had helped name the series. The message showed as read, and then nothing. At mile 11, Ethan's pace became uneven. 6 steps. A pause. 4 steps. He checked the watch after every stop. I told the audience he was bargaining with a machine because he could not bargain with me. He asked one more time for water. I held the bottle near the window so viewers could see it. I told him it was waiting at the finish. The first police lights appeared in my mirror less than a minute later. Blue and red flashed across the phone screen. The comments moved too fast to read. My viewer count jumped from 11,000 to 14. I smiled because police made every live video look serious, and serious content travelled. Some viewers typed that they were crying. Others celebrated as if they had completed the rescue themselves. The early laughing faces were still visible farther up the feed, attached to the same names now demanding an ambulance. I did not point out the hypocrisy. There would be time for that after an officer told them they had wasted emergency resources on a marriage dispute. The retired nurse posted that she was still speaking with dispatch. She asked me to unlock the doors before police reached us. I held the key ring near the camera, shook it once, and returned it to the console. Ethan was less than a quarter mile behind. In my mind, the challenge was already complete. The cruiser behind me used its speaker to order me to pull over. I raised one finger toward the camera and told the audience to stay with me. This was the part where an officer would confirm that a wife driving a family vehicle had not kidnapped anyone. The speaker repeated the order. I drove another 100 yards to reach a wider section. People later called that delay refusal. It was not. I was choosing a safe place, which should have mattered to people so concerned about safety. 2 patrol vehicles stopped behind me. A third pulled in near Ethan. I recognized Sergeant Ruiz when she stepped out. For a moment, I almost laughed. Of all the officers in New Mexico, dispatch had sent the woman who knew Ethan from the fleet yard. Of course, I thought that would help. She knew he was cautious. She also knew he could turn a loose bolt into a public emergency. An officer approached my window and told me to put the phone down. I kept it in the mount and placed both hands on the wheel. The live badge remained visible. He asked whether I was Simone Keller and whether the man behind us was my husband. I said yes. Then I explained the fitness challenge, the water, and the empty road. I said Ethan had become tired and dramatic, but he was never abandoned. The officer asked whether Ethan had agreed. I said marriage included implied consent for ordinary decisions. He asked again, more slowly. I told him Ethan knew I was helping him get healthy. That should have been enough. Across the road, Sergeant Ruiz gave Ethan water and guided him into the shade of her cruiser. He sat on the pavement with his back against the rear tire. Even from a distance, I could see his thumb moving across the watch face. He looked weak. I looked organized. The difference seemed obvious. The officer asked for license and registration. My license was in my purse. The registration card was in Ethan's glove compartment, inside the clear sleeve he checked before every trip. When I handed it over, the officer studied the name and asked who owned the crossover. I said we did. He asked why only Ethan's name appeared. I explained that he had bought the car before we married, but that 16 years made it family property in every way that mattered. The officer did not debate me. He carried the card back to his cruiser. The stream passed 16,000 viewers. I turned my face slightly toward the phone and told everyone this was what happened when strangers confused a marital argument with a crime. Comments warned me to stop talking. Others said the officer could hear me. That did not worry me. Honest people do not fear a microphone. Sergeant Ruiz came to my window next. She asked why Ethan was nearly 12 miles from the travel center without access to his car, medication, or water. I corrected her. The medication was for blood pressure, not an emergency. The water had been visible the entire time. As for the distance, Ethan used to run farther than that. She asked whether he used to do it at 42, in desert heat, at his current weight. I said people could do more than they believed when someone refused to accept excuses. She looked at the phone. A viewer comment thanked her for arriving. Another said they had sent dispatch a screen recording from mile 3. Sergeant Ruiz asked me to turn off the stream. I said I preferred witnesses because Ethan had a habit of making private conversations sound worse later. She did not argue. She told me not to touch the phone. Then she walked back to him. I could see them talking. Ethan never raised his voice. He pointed once toward the crossover, once toward the watch, and once toward my phone. Sergeant Ruiz listened in the same way she had listened at the fleet yard. The first officer returned and watched part of a video on his cruiser screen. It was my stream from several minutes earlier. Dispatch had sent the recording. My own voice came faintly across the road, calling Ethan my little hog and promising water at the finish. I told the live audience that context always sounded ugly when people cut it into pieces. Ethan stood with help. He walked toward me slowly, towel around his neck, face still pale. Sergeant Ruiz stayed beside him. He asked through the open window why I had needed 18,000 strangers to make him smaller. I told him he had made me carry our marriage for years. That part was true. He had withdrawn into work, repairs, schedules, and silence. I said I could not keep dragging every feeling out of a man who answered pain by checking a watch. Ethan did not deny it. He said he had left me alone inside too many conversations. Then he said he would have walked beside me through a real health plan, but he would not chase my version of love again. His thumb pressed the watch once. I told him that sounded impressive because police were present. If he wanted a real conversation, he could get into the passenger seat and we could finish the trip after everyone calmed down. He became quieter. That was how I knew he had run out of fight. One officer was checking a computer. Another was speaking with dispatch. Sergeant Ruiz asked Ethan for the exact starting time, and he read it from the watch. He gave her the distance, elapsed time, and the highest heart rate number. Then he said he wanted the situation handled properly. Properly was my word. Proper meant facts. Proper meant a wife did not steal a car she had driven for years. I called Bryn so she could explain how the challenge had started as a joke between friends. The call rang until voicemail answered. 1 call. 2 messages. Nothing. It did not matter. 18,000 people were still there. I faced the phone and told them to keep watching. The officers would check the records, tell Ethan to get in, and prove that outrage did not become truth just because enough strangers repeated it. The first officer returned holding my license in one hand and Ethan's registration in the other. Sergeant Ruiz stood beside him. Ethan was behind them, upright now, the black watch dull against his wrist. He was calm. For once, the calm did not look empty. The officer said the crossover was titled and registered only to Ethan Keller. It had been purchased before our marriage. Dispatch had also received 7 separate 911 calls, 2 screen recordings, the plate number, and the exact mile marker. The callers had not coordinated. They had watched the same thing and reached the same conclusion. My hand moved toward the phone. Sergeant Ruiz told me to leave it where it was. Ethan opened a folder on his own phone. The cookout clip was there. So was the grocery display joke, the old photograph, and every message where I had refused to remove them. I had watched him save those links. I had called it scorekeeping because that made the record sound petty. The old watch held the rest. Start time. Route. 12.08 miles. A heart rate high enough that the paramedic beside the third cruiser wanted him evaluated. Every time he had touched that watch, I had believed he was leaving the conversation. He had been keeping himself steady inside it. Sergeant Ruiz asked Ethan whether he had given me permission to take the vehicle from the travel center and deny him access to it. He said no. She asked how he wanted to identify our relationship for the report. He looked at me, not at the stream. Then he called me his soon-to-be ex-wife. No performance. No speech. 7 words reported in a flat voice. I tried to explain that spouses shared property. The officer said the title decided who received the keys at the roadside, while the video and driving conduct would be reviewed together. He placed the key ring in Ethan's hand. That was the moment the audience stopped belonging to me. The comments no longer argued. They thanked the callers. They asked whether Ethan was safe. The same people who had posted laughing faces at mile 1 were saving the final frame at mile 12. Nate removed himself as a co-host before the stream ended. His last message said he had sent the unedited recording to my employer so nobody could claim he approved the drive. Bryn's name never appeared again. Sergeant Ruiz directed me out of the crossover. The phone remained in its mount, still broadcasting as another officer placed my hands behind me. There was no dramatic announcement of one perfect charge. They detained me because of the dangerous slow driving, the live phone use, Ethan's condition, and my refusal to return his vehicle. The county would decide the exact list after reviewing the recordings. Ethan sat in the driver's seat. He adjusted it back to his position, set the water in the cup holder, and rested both hands on the wheel. Viewers saw him receive his own keys before an officer finally ended my stream. I spent that night in county booking, and Ethan's divorce petition later included one request preserving the live stream. Ethan remained in the house while I moved into an extended stay room beside the airport. Access to our joint account was limited to ordinary bills, and my personal sponsorship money went to the first round of expenses. Bryn refused to support my public explanation, while 3 friends removed the cookout clips they had once shared. Nate blocked my number after sending the full recording to the grocery company. My employer suspended me from public-facing work, then ended my contract after customers attached the stream to our family food campaign. I had wanted an audience large enough to prove that I controlled the joke. It was large enough to read a mile marker, capture a plate, and send officers to the exact road where Ethan stopped chasing me. Of course, people still say that means the audience saved him. They never mention that I was the one who gathered them. His black watch stopped the run at 12.08 miles. My returned phone still showed 18,406 viewers, and not one laughing face remained.